was standing ready. Lord, please, I could take a guess. Oh, would you please? We are ready. I'm lifted by the Spirit's peace. I guess we're never going home. Never joining St. John. Could never be alone. Well, I guess I'm well adjusted, but the pains they never leave, except for my feet. I keep my arms in my suitcases and my shoulders halfway down to the ground. There's definitely something cooking. This guy keeps on looking. I have people shouting your name. I have people shouting your name.
Cool. Yeah. Do what you prepped.
People
All right.
shouting your name.
All right, we are back on the Slack line once again with JWoww.
Wow.
And the boss.
The boss is coming!
That's a made-up dumb fairy tale name, you
Still not sure JWoww is JWoww, but we're going to go with it for now. He's missing his mustache, and I don't really like it.
If you find it, please bring it back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, call it 604
Six-
720 0505.
God, is that your actual number?
No.
Bold.
You're gonna be getting
Bold
some
move.
unsolicited dick pics.
creepy people listen
Yeah.
to this podcast. I
All
wouldn't do
right.
that.
Yeah, so before the break, we were talking some 21st century dating and
Communication.
and
Touching a lot of
yeah,
stuff.
Yeah,
Some good stuff.
some virtual reality porn and things
Yeah.
of that nature.
we're
But
gonna
we're gonna get
invest.
into some social justice warrior talk.
Social justice.
Yeah, for those who are not really aware, or you want to get into the definitions of social
Well, yeah,
justice
yeah,
warriors?
the
Okay.
The literal definition.
Okay, so yeah, we'll
be
throw it to
some
Kyler
rambling
to
here.
bring up the social justice warrior Wikipedia page.
Yeah, I prepped this like I was, coming into
I
a
like
social
the
exam.
I like the rip in your paper. That is that is
It's like
definitely
social studies all over again right now. I don't know why.
yellow legal pad.
Okay, so the Wikipedia definition of a social justice warrior is a pejorative, which is derogatory term for an individual promoting socially progressive views, including feminism, civil rights, multiculturalism, and identity politics. The accusation of being a SJW carries implication of pursuing personal validation rather than any deep-seated conviction and being engaged in disingenuous social justice arguments or activism to raise personal reputation, also known as virtue signaling. So that's the Wikipedia definition.
Okay.
Wikipedia.
And then I've got that's the the Wikipedia. And then I've got the two Urban Dictionary definitions, and I'll see you.
There's two?
There's Urban Dictionary is like you write your own
That's true.
definitions.
Well,
of
so is
things.
Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Well,
it's the
true.
Let's see which one's more legitimate.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. The Urban Dictionary here, there's two that are kind of like contrast views. So one is written by a SJW, as they say,
Okay.
and one is not. So
Okay.
I'll see if you can
Sure.
figure out which one isn't.
Okay.
Okay, so the first one here, Urban Dictionary number 2. SJWs are people with paper-thin skin who always find something to be offended about. They generally have no concept of humor. Words they commonly use include intolerant, offensive, triggering, sexist, and racist.
That's messed up.
Okay, and then the example they give here is non-SJW. A man walks into a bar, and then the social justice warrior responds, "You sexist fucking pig. I identify as a bar, and the fact you didn't get verbal consent from the bar before you entered it is very triggering."
That's not it.
Wow. I hope people check out the Wikipedia page first on that one.
Right.
Not even, man.
But that's like a viewpoint that some people have against SJWs.
Well, I mean, yeah, okay. So my take on the whole SJW thing before you get much further.
Well, I just want to read the
Okay.
other one.
Oh, that was.
The
Oh, sorry. I
there's
thought that was
one more.
both. Well,
No,
okay.
this is one. This is the other one. Okay. So then the Urban Dictionary number 4, it's a pejorative term for people who acknowledge the existence of racism, sexism, homophobia, and other forms of bigotry. It was created by insecure heterosexual white cisgender men who are terrified of losing their privileged status and preferential treatment in society, as well as their ability to treat women and minorities like pieces of trash with public endorsement. So those are the two sides that from my research that I've kind of seen, like people's opinions of what an SJW is.
Yeah.
That's why dictionaries are useful.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, I want to get my opinion on this out there because I've been thinking about it a lot for the last couple of days after you mentioned it. I think that just falls under the category of like, well, any sort of label really that for some reason gets twisted into a derogatory term. Like when you really break it down, a social justice warrior, and like the first definition in the first paragraph of the Wikipedia definition, you know, you hear these things like people that stand up for like equality and these types of and like tolerance and whatever.
About equality. That's sort of how they're putting
Bitch.
it.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, okay. My whole thought on something like that is, if the worst part of a social justice warrior is that they're crying about
They're oversensitive towards like just little social interactions.
if that's their worst part, then I'll take them any day over the opposite, which tends to be somebody who is is like they'll make like a homophobic joke or something like that, and people will be like, now, I mean, there's certain things that you can't say anymore, right? Like I get called it a lot, you know, it's like from my dad sometimes. Be like, he'll make like a homophobic joke or a racist joke, and I'll be like, Dad, like that's not funny, and you can't say that anymore. Like, it's just your generation of pussies or whatever that, you know, so politically correct and stuff. And it's like, you know what? Well, you can be funny without being an asshole. So just don't be an asshole, and maybe you won't get a bunch of people jumping down your throat. The idea that these people are kind of superficial activists, I totally agree with. You know, for the most part, you're not really actually going out to affect change. You're not marching in a rally. You're not writing a letter to a congressperson or something. You're
seeking for attention.
Yeah, you're bitching at somebody out on the internet or piling on to feel good about yourself and your own views. That's not necessarily okay. But if a piling on of progressive views and general good thoughts pushes people with idiotic and fringe ideas to like a narrow corner of society where they can just yell at each other in the fucking void of the internet about how black people are taking over or something fucking stupid like that, then that's fine by me.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know, I just have a problem with the way the definition is set up, you know, because it's the first thing that you're going to read on social justice, or whenever you think of social justice and you look it up, you're going to, I don't know, put it into a little box of people who bitch about it, you know.
Yeah.
Oversensitive people and discredit completely the true, I don't know, altruism about it, you know?
Right. That's what thank you for saying discredit. That's what I was trying to get at, is like the idea that you can just throw out this term of being like, well, you're just an overly offended social justice warrior as a way to insulate oneself against somebody speaking out against a non-progressive attitude or something like that. And you can use, you're a social justice warrior, and everybody around goes like, yeah, the person's just like a social justice warrior that's saying really, you know, things that make a lot of sense. And
I've got to jump in there because it's like from this standpoint, it sounds like you're very much like me. We're in the middle between, if you imagine definition 1 being far left, definition 2 being far right.
Yeah,
we're kind of in the middle in our stance of being a social justice warrior, right? But there's a lot more higher implications of like the far left extreme social justice warriors, the people who fight for equality, that have fought and basically express themselves to the point where they've actually fallen around to the other side, to where you're fallen to this absolute right, almost fascist mindset of overpowering people's mindsets without having a discussion, right? Where what they're doing is they're yelling these views, these illogical views sometimes, these standpoints against facts and sciences and biology to the point where it's not even like they have no correlation to the subject matter themselves. They just want to stand there and basically be the hero of their group because they're trying to flagship some sort of marginalized issue, you know, or portion of society in order to better like that ideology themselves, right? It's like they're focusing on aspects of this in order to somehow come ahead better than others.
Also, there's a thing that a lot of times these people are not interested in actually social justice.
But that's exactly it, right?
They are interested in selling an image through social media that you are a social justice warrior, and therefore you are
a good person.
You are a good person. You know, I don't know. Like, I see a lot of this back home, especially in the Facebook thing. Like, people, they don't research anymore the situations, or they don't go deep in the facts, into the facts of something that happened, and they are already giving their opinions away that this is like that or this is like this.
Yes.
It's just actually to create an image that you are this opinionated person that is far left or far right, but you are right and the others are wrong.
You're trying
it's a
to be-
one-sided opinion.
You know,
completely.
and it doesn't actually matter which side you fall on, because it's not the point, you know. Like, even if you go far left or if you go far right, I don't think that either of those are actually
No. It's and
right. You know, it's not accurate.
No, yeah, like it goes back to what Kyler said, like, and I think it mixes in with what with Jerry and I were saying, how like this name sort of discredits people automatically. Like, if you do have people that fall under this category that are fighting for things they think are progressive, like anti-vaccinations or something like that, which tends to be like a far left thing, and they get lumped in with people who are, you know, protesting against things like discrimination and stuff like that. And now this word gets used as a weapon to lump those people together and be like, okay, well, if this person who's like perpetuating all this anti-science stuff and stuff as a social justice warrior for the quote-unquote far left, then me as a person who now champions or like, you know, makes a post about racism or something like that on my Facebook becomes a social justice warrior, lumped in with this same person who is an idiot, you know?
I think we're confusing being progressive and being like what is labeled as a social justice warrior, being
but both of
a
those
far
things,
leftist.
but both of those
extremist in
things
the
get
case.
labeled as a social justice warrior is what I'm talking about. Like,
But that's important. That's why it's important to define the difference between being progressive in a society and moving away from racism and bigotry, whereas you go to the other, the far end of the spectrum, where you're almost contradicting yourself. You're inhibiting a free speech, and you're creating this hostile environment to the point where having no conversation, you know, like where the right and the left should be having a dialogue.
yeah.
To the fact where they're not having a dialogue at all.
I agree,
And
but
that
the
creates fertile ground for violence. Right?
I totally agree. My whole issue is really centered around the idea of the label itself and the fact that if I do want to have a reasonable discussion with somebody that is, you know, the opposite political view of myself in many respects, it's something that can get thrown out that they use themselves. Even if it doesn't dismiss my point, they can use themselves to be like, well, this person's just a social justice warrior and they're just bitching to bitch on even like reasonable issues, you know, like it doesn't just because you and I associate a social justice warrior and what that is with people who are like really fringe to the far point that you and I don't want to be associated with them. Well, we are associated with them as soon as we prescribe to a progressive view, because as you read out the definition, that's the first fucking sentence, right? And so anybody that doesn't prescribe to a progressive view in a lot of those factors, which, in my opinion, and in the increasingly the court of public opinion, are wrong thoughts of discrimination and thoughts of bigotry and stuff like that, can use this word now to discredit an opposing person and just keep using it as like no different than saying like, oh, you're a snowflake, you're PC, you're a social justice warrior, blah, 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 I'm plugging my ears and I'm not listening to you, even when you're talking about reasonable points.
But that's the key difference between what you're describing and what a social justice warrior is discussing key points. Whereas the fact that you can go to a rally and you can see these clips online where social justice warriors gather in groups and basically refuse to have a discussion, where their goal is to scream and yell as loud as they can to control the power of the room, to come out as the victory here. Like it's not about resolving an issue. It's about bringing some sort of voice to an issue without actually providing a solution. That's what these SJWs are doing. And I think they've kind of evolved from this keyboard warrior, back when the internet was first starting up. You can go on and anonymously just destroy somebody on YouTube or Twitter or whatnot, but somehow it's evolved into society where it's like, oh, we can actually promote our views in groups and clusters if we just speak louder than the other person without sitting down and outlining facts and science.
The problem for me is that the facts, man.
Yeah.
Facts for me, it's like for me it's tiring, man. Like to read these people talking about, it's actually nothing because there's no facts on that.
Yeah.
Know? It's not like if you have a really racist person and you come and say, oh, that's really wrong, they're not gonna change. And it's not the thought is not wrong, it's just not true. If you go through facts, it's just logical that racism doesn't make any fucking sense. It rationally, it doesn't make sense. So that's how we have to
What do you mean it doesn't make sense?
But look, okay,
Explain that to
so
me.
I think
well, how race make sense?
It like well,
Like
first of all, you have
how there is a race that is better than the other.
You need
it
to-
doesn't make sense.
well, it doesn't. But like these people, you think rationally to us it doesn't make sense, but these people have rationalized themselves into thinking that it does make sense.
It makes sense for the lifestyle that they live and the morals that they stand for.
If we stick with a fact, they would, you can fight with facts.
Okay, I think
that's
for me-
instead of fighting with opinions, we should be fighting more.
I
with
agree.
facts.
I totally agree. But when we're coming at an impasse where there are going to be segments where neither side has facts. Okay? When you're in an argument with somebody, you don't we have our phones on you, but you can't be like, hold on, let me look up 54% of whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like you're arguing off the cuff or whatever. Or in like a social justice warrior sense, if you're standing at rallies and you're shouting about how white oppression is still a thing and we should be fighting against it and all this type of stuff, and you're gonna call that social justice warriors, and like it's going to descend into people screaming at each other in general. Who's louder? That's just like what fucking happens in
Just
human
screaming
nature.
opinions.
Dude, I think
But
that
hang on.
Sorry.
If the person if it comes down to that, if that's the binary argument, who's louder? And one side is arguing for bigotry and oppression and whatever and blah 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 blah, and their few good things might be like appropriate fiscal policies and stuff like that, which aren't even necessarily true, or like dealing with like capitalism and stuff, which is true. And the other side of it is people that are fighting for equality and people that are yelling about stuff that is reasonable, and their worst part is that they're a little like their fringe is anti-vaccination or something like that. I'm siding with the side that is on the progressive side of things, even if their fringe has some idiotic ideas. The base core of that side of the argument is right. And so if it comes to a shouting match, I'm standing behind that person,
dude,
that's shouting about the right things.
But I think that beyond the problem that it's not based on facts. Of course, that facts are directly what guide a dialogue to be true or to be progressive or not. But the problem really is that it's everything that we have now is a communication that's not really willing to change from both sides. you
Yeah,
know?
I would agree.
The problem is that it's not a dialogue. It's just a preach, from both sides. So, of course, facts are what centralize the opinion and what does that. But we need to have sort of a change in how we the intention that we have when we communicate with each other.
Well, I think starting a good place to start is stop referring to it as sides. Like, I get so sick of being associated with like the left or whatever that means, because it or liberal or whatever, but because it includes these fringe of people that are idiots
Social
or
justice
whatever,
warriors
right?
in that label.
Yeah, and so, but like I have ideas and thoughts that are rooted in both quote unquote sides of this political spectrum. This is the thing that people are kind of like, well, not even political spectrum, economic spectrum. This is something that people have like deviated from. This left and right was originally, it was built in how the economy works and what our opinions are on that.
And the American Civil War too.
No, that's not, no, man. Left and right was built on the spectrum of the economy. And like left was communism and right is capitalism.
Right.
And somehow over the 50 years of the battle between communism and capitalism, it might be just because Lambert's home. Somewhere along the like these 50 years between this, or like 100 years between this fight of capitalism and communism, it morphed into, well, if you have ideas of social, like socialism and stuff like that, universal healthcare and these types of things, then you get lumped into the left. And if you have ideas of, trickle-down economics and stuff like that, you get lumped into the right.
Right.
And then, well, the people that tend to have ideas about trickle-down economics and stuff that are on the right tend to have ideas about, like, old-fashioned ideas, conservative ideas and stuff like that. And that's just a tendency.
Right.
And again, on the left side, people that tend to be for, like universal healthcare and stuff like that tend to have more empathy for like welfare and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
But that's just a tendency. It's not.
It's
the
good
truth.
to label it as a tendency because it's exactly as you're saying. It's not an absolute belief of
Yeah,
what
like
we're
you
doing.
can believe that you can believe in trickle down economics, as stupid as it is, in my opinion. You can believe in it and also not be racist. Like
Right.
those things don't go hand in hand together. But we, as a society, have lumped those two things together. No different than the right side of it will lump somebody with that thinks universal healthcare is a good idea and just call them a communist.
It's
like
it's misguided. It's a
Well,
completely misguided compression of information into a symbol.
it's a use of these words again to discredit people. No different than the social justice warrior. Yes, these people exist that are that give that side of the argument, quote unquote, a bad name.
Right.
But now this social justice warrior label can get used as a fucking arrow to people that have reasonable arguments.
Just
no
like
different
communists.
no different than like, well, you're just a bigot can get used as a arrow from the left side to the right side because, well, you support this capitalist idea, so you
Labels.
must support racism. Like, well, no.
Yeah. You're totally right, and I would like to actually say thank you to someone today, which is Donald Trump, because he made this is the guy that made kind of this discussion possible, because he's so like his visions are so terrible that today I can I would be more on the left side, but I can look at John McCain in the States. I'm like, oh, maybe he's not so bad,
not as
like
bad.
he's not as bad. Like, so like there's the extreme thing that is Trump. There's nothing. There's not even left nor right. So that's how we see that it's not only two sides. There's like this other kind of strange thing.
Well, that's what I mean. It's not left or right because
That's
it's
the
not
thing.
rooted in
So-
economical opinions on how these things should work. It's rooted. We
But it
call
was-
this alt right, but it's associated. It's this group of people that aren't of a political spectrum. It's an opinion spectrum of bigotry and stuff like that they cuddle together with or whatever, but their political views can actually float along this whole, or economic views and stuff can actually float along this whole spectrum.
Yeah, but that's what happened. Like, so, like, when we see someone like Trump making some allegations when they have like the rally of the white supremacists saying that they have to
Neo-Nazis.
the neo-Nazis, and he says that there are good people in both sides and no one was wrong. You're like, oh my god, like this is not an opinion of the right. And the right, some of the guys in the right in the US, they're like right away like we don't agree with that.
Yeah.
So then you see like, fuck, thank you. There's more than just left and right. You know, there people can actually do something together, because the problem with democracy is when you divide the population completely, then you create chaos. That's what happened in the U.S. Like,
But that's the only way
well,
well, I wouldn't say that's the only way democracy works, but I mean that's the principle it's founded on is you have different views than somebody else, and the majority of those views
But you don't
win.
have. But you don't have to divide the population.
You don't
That's
you don't have to divide it evenly, which I think is the biggest problem in the U.S.
Yeah,
is
yeah.
there's only it because
You
they
have
have a
left and right.
binary choice.
Yeah.
It's grown binary arguments between both
Yeah.
sides, and it's grown a team mentality where you feel like you can't cross paths because this side has this history that you disagree with, or this side has this history you disagree with.
Yeah.
But this
However, when you see someone like for me was weeks ago, it was like it blew my mind. It was like, wow, wait, there's not only two sides. Like when you see someone like Joe McCain that you.
But there is though. There isn't when you like poll people. There's not. But when it comes down to actually voting on things, there is. There's only two sides, and so they have to fall on one or the other. Whereas a lot of systems, parliamentary systems like we have here, we have like 3 or more
Party?
actual parties where like viable candidates, where like it tends to go between liberal and conservative.
Yeah.
But there's third party options that actually have enough people in them that they can affect change for that group. So instead of having like something like the US has, basically should have really 4 parties or maybe 3. They should have this centrist party which both try to get to at this point. They're because they both have to try to appeal to everybody. Versus let's appeal to this group of people that agrees with our platform, and those people will vote us into office or whatever. And
That's what Trump did.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
that is what Trump did,
that's
but
exactly what he
it
did.
is. But if he had been able, or I mean, he was able. Like technically, you can run as an independent, but you need in the U.S. especially, you need the funds to run that the RNC and the DNC have. So you have to succumb to one of them. And so even if you champion yourself as an independent, eventually, again, you have to get into this binary system. And so as much as, Trump is not a Republican.
No, he was a Democrat.
He should be. That whole segment, Trump and Bannon and this segment of racist idiots should have their own party. It should be like whatever they want to call it. The Tea Party or whatever. The Tea Party almost came up. They wouldn't have won, but if it was an option where they could have won seats, then people would vote for those people, and they would maybe have like 10 or 12 seats in the parliament versus having a president of the United States.
But they wouldn't come out.
I disagree.
Well, I
They
kind
wouldn't
of
come
want
out as racists. They wouldn't come out as...
Dude, they're all coming out as racist. That's the whole thing.
No.
The
They
whole
are
thing
not
is people aren't
saying-
caring about being
They are not
racist
saying-
or anti-progression in general. People are like,
Because-
oh yeah, the president is like me, so I can come out and talk about how racist I am now.
Yeah, no, but not the politicians. Like what they are doing is that they are, some of them, the racist one probably, they're not saying anything, which is just like standing behind Trump, which is the same thing of saying yes, we support the racism, and some of them are actually, like I said, like Joe McCain and another Republican, they're like, no, we disagree. So like those people, the ones that stand behind but doesn't say anything, they wouldn't create a party like that, because even so, if the race problem, like it is a problem, it is a big problem right now. it is not popular.
If they
So,
thought that
thank
party,
God.
if they thought that creating their own party would end up with them actually keeping their job, they would.
Oh, they would do anything to keep their job.
Well, that's
This
what I
power.
think, that those people would have a better chance keeping their job in this climate to create their own party than well, I mean, not in the U.S. political spectrum, because that's just not the way their system works.
I want to jump in here.
Yeah.
And I want to try and tie this back to the
Sure.
like what we've just talked about is very like political and parties, but I want to try and loop it back to what I was hoping to get into would be the dangers of the social justice
Okay,
warrior
sure.
mentality.
Yeah.
Right.
Great. Thank you.
So we steer away from the left and right, but also it's an interesting point to bring up, is because when you have these groups of people basically outlashing against people that don't agree with their views, people become afraid to express themselves, right? And so when we talk about Donald Trump winning, Russian hacking conspiracies aside, you kind of have this this thought process of, well, maybe what happened is people were so afraid to have these far leftist social justice warrior people come after them that the only way they felt safe was to elect somebody with, and whether or not they were the exact same beliefs that Trump routed his campaign on, but they thought that maybe if there's somebody in power, then I'm going to be comfortable enough to actually be able to talk about stuff rather than being pushed into a closet, the door locked, and I'm not allowed to talk about anything, right? Because the grounds for bad communication isn't no communication, it's better communication, right? So that's the separation of left and right. But when you think about what happens behind the voter booth, I could come to you and say, oh, I'm liberal, I'm progressive, I have all these views because I'm afraid that you're going to judge me, or you're going to limit me, or somehow categorize me into this lesser being with the views that I have, that I've actually decided that I am maybe a far right person, and I'm only going to be comfortable doing that behind a closed door, behind the voter booth, where I tick left or right on Trump, right?
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's definitely a part of it for sure. Yeah, but
he rooted his campaign on that.
Oh, definitely. But I mean, if we're gonna talk about the like the validation that something like that has,
But
what do you do when that person like they can't be reasoned with? They're not gonna change their mind. Like, what do you do when it doesn't matter how open your communication is? This person completely disregards facts. There's like,
but that happens on both sides. That happens on
I
the
know,
right side
but
and
like
on the
this
left
is
side.
again, like, hold on, you're throwing it into sides again. I'm talking about a one-on-one argument. Like, okay, so
But an argument is two sides. It's two opposing.
I know, but you're talking about
sides.
left and right
Well,
sides.
no, I'm not. I mean, like this is what happens. Like if we're debating biology in terms of what I can interpret as being factual and what's not factual. When it comes down to hard facts, there's always a left and right side of it, right? There's a yes and a no, a yin and yang.
Yeah, yes and no. There's not a left and right side to facts. There's a yes and a no to facts. But if I'm presenting you with facts and you're ignoring them, what other course is there?
Well, it's not no communication, right? It's an open dialogue, and I don't.
But
have
if the
answer
open
for this. I'm
dialogue,
not-
but if the open dialogue doesn't go anywhere, you can see how.
But this
I
is
mean,
why-
like even in a one-on-one situation, that gets frustrating, right? To the point of anger.
Yeah.
So imagine that happening, and this is what's happened to these people, like you've talked about, right? They've been pushed into this segment, right, without being able to actually voice themselves, out of fear of. But the fear is well founded. Mm-hmm. They shouldn't voice themselves if their opinions are idiotic.
But how do you talk about change, and how do you get to the root of the problem without being able to openly talk about it? Like,
I know. Okay, sorry. Let me backtrack. So, like, if these people have been presented with all the evidence to the contrary, and yet still hold their opinion, blissfully ignorant, knowing all the facts, but for some reason not accepting them, which is happening all over the place.
Well,
and I'm not. And again, like to say, well, your side does it too, is exactly what I'm saying. It completely discredits a one-on-one argument, being like, well, if we're gonna talk about like institutionalized racism or something like that, and and then the person who is disregarding my facts about racism and systematic racism or whatever, all of a sudden throws out, well, your side believes in anti-vax or whatever. Like, that's not an argument, but it's their way of being like, well, like, I'm not listening to you anymore, because they've realized they're wrong or in a corner or whatever, but they have nothing else to say. And so when you have nothing else to say, you're just going to end up going into an echo chamber where people agree with you. And hopefully, in my opinion, that group of people that believes in these outdated things gets smaller and smaller and smaller. The only way to really, like...
It's through education.
It's through education.
It's not through...
It's through...
I'll use the word loosely here. It's not through dictatorship. It's not through me overpowering your views.
It's a communication that's based on shaming.
It's opening a dialogue.
Okay.
Even somebody who's far rooted and is not going to change their views. Maybe they're a racist, for example, but you've talked to them and you've explained your side. You've both presented facts, or maybe you haven't. At least now that's something that's going to grow in the back of their heads, right? Maybe they've never had that conversation.
Maybe, but okay, look, think about this, and I don't like. Internet arguments get descended into this sometimes, but I think it's more applicable than we like to agree with or like to actually admit. But something like World War II happens, okay? World War II happens because there is a group of people that are taking over the world in complete absence of like facts, are systematically annihilating an entire group of people and more.
But what do you mean by facts?
By scientific facts.
Which are what?
Which are that Jewish people and black people and homosexual people are not lesser than the German Aryan race. Mm-hmm. Okay? And eventually it got to the point... Hold on. We appeased those people. They gave them countries. They gave them land. They gave them whatever. And eventually... it got to the point of these people aren't listening about what they're doing is wrong, and a fight has to happen.
What you've just said about World War II, though, that's one side of the coin. That's the side we're presented mainly in history class and discussions. But you have to also understand that after World War II, and this is kind of a little bit off topic, the economic reparations that Germany was going under.
None of that justifies genocide.
Well,
it doesn't justify genocide, man.
It doesn't justify it, of course. But that's a piece as to why World War II
Of course,
happened,
it's a reason,
right?
but you can't.
Not a reason. It's why because somebody took control of the economic decline that Germany was going through after World War I. The reparations they were forced to be paying after the Treaty of Versailles or whatever.
Versailles, yeah.
Versailles. So it's stuff like that when people basically felt there's no end to this kind of, I don't know, the repayments that they're going through, that the German people can easily fell into this whim of this one man with these fascist views, right?
Totally. Yeah. Those stuff happen, and similar things are happening in the U.S. right now,
for sure.
Where people are, there's common enemies that they're building up and that type of thing that get people riled up, and people are feeling their way of life, slipped away from them, but like they are reacting to it in the wrong way. They're scapegoating the wrong people because the people at the top are telling them who to scapegoat. But it's kind of beside the point. Like, the point is that this grew for whatever reason. Yeah, you're right. It was built out of the economic crisis from World War I. But this non-progressive, awful, terrifying view grew large enough that it required a physical, violent response to suppress. And I'm not saying that should be the descent of all arguments, but in the face of steadfast ignorance, eventually there is no other recourse other than to be like, well, then fucking go away. If you're not going to adhere to the facts and the laws of what we've built here, then fucking go away.
Is that what's going to happen now?
Well, this is an interesting moment because
I don't know what I hope about that. I don't know.
When you say like this dangerous view took over, it doesn't just like people go, oh yeah, I'm gonna agree. Obviously, there's people that fight against it, right? But this is what happened too in Stalin's Russia and Mao's revolution, right? Is this silence on different views, right? It comes into this basically this group is a louder power, a louder voice than these groups. And if you don't conform, you're out. That's why, like, you know, when you look at the First Amendment, why freedom of speech is so important.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's
because
true.
it can be triggered either way.
It's
you
true.
can take advantage of it in either. You know, when we come back to sides, you can take advantage of it in either sides.
It's true. I guess when when we're talking about, like, you know, the violent clash between ideologies, and one side is fighting for freedom and lack of bigotry and lack of you know, racism and all that stuff, and one side is fighting for supremacy of one thing, like I will automatically default to the side that is fighting for what is the right thing, and to be labeled as something bad when speaking up against, you know, even rhetoric that approaches bigotry and homophobia and all that type of stuff. Like, I think that is it's a flaw in human nature. It's like making fun of the nerd at school. It's like, oh, you got 100% on your test? What are you, a fucking nerd? Like, yeah, you're a fucking idiot, and I'm a nerd. So what? I'm on the right side of things.
Right. But here's the issue with defining ideologies is how do you market or sorry, not market, but how do you decide who can be marginalized and what is a part of, or sorry, which ideologies can be marginalized and which ones not. And an example
I don't think any should be.
But here's the thing: who gets to define those needs of society? And an example would be LGBT or LGBT, but that's what the difference is. So lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, forever. Okay. And then all of a sudden we're into this shift now where we have to put the
bi
Q
and
plus,
yeah,
because all of a sudden how do you be a marginalized ideology if you're not gonna include other marginalized ideologies? Mm-hmm. How do you define yourself as who can be included and who can't be included? And it's almost become this battle of ideologies and which group is going to be louder than the other group, and how can I get my views across more? And this is where it kind of ties back into the mindset of these SJWs. And I know that's kind of a term that gets redundant throughout this podcast.
It's okay. Well, that's the topic.
But you know, most of the stuff social justice warriors are talking about are trivial things in comparison to the actual problems out there. You know,
I would agree with that.
You have people online attacking professors and universities for not having safe spaces, for colleges having Halloween costumes that you know don't align with.
Yeah, I definitely agree with stuff like that.
Like this is the mentality of the social justice warrior that I kind of wanted to define from being progressive as to being like this almost
it's definitely
idiotic,
regressive. Yeah, you know? It's idiotic and regressive, and
and what's happening is it's the dangers of it is that it kind of starts to hinder on some sort of freedom of speech, right?
Yeah, because who are you to say what people should be getting up in arms about?
Well, exactly. And maybe this is something you guys can chime in. It's like, in terms of culture, right? You have culture to share it. If you look at the Japanese culture, they love it when their culture is being shared, as long as it's not being exploitive. But they're actually, if you poll the people, and there's research that's been done into this, is that most people who wear kimonos or basically promote their culture, it's a good thing. But then you have these SJWs that think of it like all of a sudden it's this cultural appropriation. It's this bad thing, and they get triggered by it. You know, like, but who are you to be triggered by it? Or like, you're not even part of this culture. So like, how would you feel in terms of, and this is recent examples of Halloween parties that have people wearing sombreros and whatnot, and basically, is it exploitative? Is it just a celebration of culture? Like, there's a fine line, but the social justice warriors take this immediate position, and it has nothing to do with them. That it's cultural appropriation.
Yeah, I get that type of stuff for sure. Yeah, and I guess, my whole take is I hate being lumped in with people like that, because I definitely agree. Like, why are you arguing about, whether or not this place will cut your hair? Yeah. Like, really, like...
I think the whole process of arguing is a problem, and the way we've designed the dialogue between people and between the two wider sides of the spectrum, you know? It's because it's a communication based on shaming and like it's really not an exchange of ideas.
That's the problem. And see, this is what happens And obviously I'm being in the most extreme scenario here, but if you've ever listened to Jordan B. Peterson, who is a University of Toronto professor, Canadian guy, I highly recommend listening to his thoughts on this whole situation. He gets into it really well on Joe Rogan podcast.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then also, what is his name? Ben Shapiro?
Ben Shapiro.
Yeah. He was also got, when I first listened to Ben Shapiro, I was like, what is this guy?
I like Ben Shapiro.
I just saw clips, but I never actually listened to the facts that he was presenting. And I can't remember where I was going with this. But, the far, the most extreme case of this SJW stuff is what Jordan B. Peterson ties into almost like Marxism and postmodernists being somehow this will lead to what happened in Stalin's reign over the Soviet Union and what happened in Mao's Cultural Revolution, and it becomes into this groups against each other for the betterment of one person's view, one person's ideology, right? It's what happened. It's why communism kind of is a thing, in it's different in the Soviet Union or Russia than it is in China these days, right?
I would say that part of that has really changed though, with for me anyways. When you look back on those historical contexts, like the Mao and the Stalin thing, my thought is we should be learning from those scenarios.
But nobody does.
Because
it's poorly taught in our society.
Yeah.
The closest current example we have of this is North Korea. If you look at what's happening in North Korea, that's exactly what's happening now. But everybody looks at North Korea as a joke, right?
Well, yeah, but I think that we've
How do
gone
you
from
mean?
a point
Sorry.
where
How do you mean?
North Korea is under a dictatorship rule where the state basically feeds the citizens lies. They only have access to so much information.
Yeah.
It's under a communist regime.
But do you think that this is essentially what happens to communism?
No, it's a dictatorship.
Regimes?
This is
A kingdom. It's a primitive
it's not
kingdom.
communism, they just call it that.
It's not. It's the most extreme version of it. It's
I think
know,
it's
man.
just
It's not even,
a
man, because
version, because
it's not,
in my
because
opinion,
this
it's just
is-
like
yeah.
a crazy guy that happened to
Crazy
be
family, man.
he is not a.
They call it communism
good
to
leader.
placate the people that
Right.
they all think they're getting an equal share.
And
of
that's
something.
why now they
That's
say
what
that
happened
communism
in
is a
China
system that
and
doesn't
Russia,
work.
Yeah.
Soviet Union.
Yeah.
I think you can have good leaders, independently of the system that.
But I think
Definitely.
But this is, I'm drawing some lines here.
I know.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm just I'm drawing lines in between the comparisons of the most the most extreme version of it. This is all hypothetical, right?
I agree, but I think that when we look back on those things, and our whole system of how we elect leaders and all that type of stuff, it's really new. It's really new in human history, especially
not that new.
democracy.
Democracy is founded based off of what happened in the Greek.
Yeah, but that wasn't democracy. They had fucking slaves and stuff like that, man. They
that
had
doesn't have
votes
anything
in
to do with-
Senate, and they had that type of thing. But anyways, it's kind of beside the point.
We have a progressive version
Even
of
that-
democracy, but it's still the same thing that it was founded on.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. But
It's a republic now,
type
though,
uh,
of
beyond a democracy.
Yeah, I would say I would.
okay,
agree
here.
with that. Yeah,
okay,
they're
so we
definitely
have.
a
This is what
republic.
this is what I mean, though. If democracy was around all that long and was as good as it's supposedly supposed to be, then it would have taken over everything by now. But it hasn't. There's still kings. There's still dictatorships. There's still communism. There's still even our own democracies are super, super flawed. So
Totally. There's no perfect system.
But
That's
hold
the
on.
issue.
Let me get this point out.
Yeah.
In that time period, in these last 200 years, we have learned so much. Even the last 60 years, we've learned so much about equality of people. Some people genuinely thought that there's scientific differences intellectually between white people and black people, men and women, and that type of thing. They thought those were scientific facts. We know those aren't facts now. And so if you prescribe to an idea that thinks those are facts, you're fucking wrong. It's not a debate anymore. Those things are not up for debate. They used to be. Not that long ago.
Well, they're
even
still,
like
they're
60
still up
years.
for debate.
No, they're not.
Not with core ideology, but in defining factors of what definitions are. We are still in an evolving stage.
Oh, totally.
We're in a
but
huge
what I'm
shift.
saying is something like racism.
Mm-hmm.
if
Like-
you exhibit racism to
Right.
me, you automatically disqualify yourself, to me, in pretty much any other category of intellectualism. Because you are prescribing to an idea that is fundamentally wrong. And so we're at an impasse now where I think the reason something like the social justice warrior, the fringe of it that are wrong, we'll put those aside, okay? Where the reason you have an influx of this political correctness and this like, you know, social justice warriorness, for lack of a better term, is because you're now up against a group of people that is like, wait, no, you're wrong about this. Your opinion is not. It's based on flawed truths. It's not based on a truth.
No, and something
And
that is
so-
proven to be damaging.
Right. And so there's a hard stance now. There is no appeasement to that. I will not appease to that. Like, I was talking with my dad about the vote in the U.S. and he's like, well, maybe like some of these people that are like Republicans and stuff like that, like they have interesting ideas and good ideas. Like, I totally agree with that. But as soon as you exhibit homophobia, or as soon as you champion even like vote along party lines for something that is damaging to a group of people, I don't care what else you have to say. I really don't. And I think that is the attitude that a lot of people of our generation are taking, and that's why it's getting erupted into what are passionate and violent outbursts sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
I had a point here but I kind of lost it. But to just like the mentality of SJWs is what you're talking about is you basically what's happened is how we've been able to root out racism in society and bigotry is by having a discussion and presenting it and recognizing the facts of it. But just to loop it back to the topic at hand here is that what's happening is that we're not presenting where it's happening. We're just saying it's happening. You know, like institutional racism is being defined as a totally different thing in the mindset over there. It's like where in a legal form or where in the social amendment does it say that social amendment, the thing Constitution, that thing. But where does it say that somebody of minority can't do this? So to me, like, institutional racism is this. Everything else is more racism that's kind of been implemented through a personal ideology, you know?
I just want to.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, but that personal ideology belonged to.
At some point, and it's important to highlight it. It's important to talk about
But
it.
again, like all of those laws and stuff, even the Constitution and stuff, was all written by people that even themselves, as revolutionary as it was,
They were
to
slave
have-
owners.
Yeah, they were slave owners.
were
They had
assholes.
ideals
Yeah.
that are
Yeah.
no longer okay.
Yeah.
And like that was only 300 years ago. That's not a long time. We think it's a long time,
But we've come a long way.
But as far as we have come a long way.
Almost.
I wouldn't even say that. I
But-
wouldn't say we've come a long way. We've come a long way, like socially, and how we communicate and how connected we are, and like technologically, obviously.
Everything is fair now,
but how
sort of.
we treat each other, and like our mindset on survival instincts of like togetherness and being with, you know, people that we are familiar with and stuff like that. Like that stuff is not evolved out of us.
Can
Not
I-
even
can I
close.
just,
And it
I
never
just
will be.
Want to make might be just my opinion. I don't think that this term it's pretty accurate.
Which term?
The social justice warriors.
Well, it's
Because like it's just us creating another term for
it's totally
people
a
having
label.
opinions,
Yeah.
you know, like this is not
true.
like this has been there forever.
Yeah.
People that have extremes input about something and people that have extremes input about other stuff. We're just creating another term for something that it has been a while there. Like, so would you say that some people would say that the people that fought for racial equality in the 60s, 50s, and 70s, were they social justice warriors?
No,
would they say,
because
would they say
there's
that
a
the other
difference.
would they say that the other side was also, you know, like I don't think that we
We're calling it the right way.
yeah, I don't think that we are calling it the right way. Yeah, I think like there are visions of what's going on, but when we resume that to social justice warriors, I don't think that we are actually.
It's
doing
a sarcastic
anything.
definition.
It's like how we used to call people hippies, and that was a derogatory term for people.
Well, that's a
But
good
now
example, yeah.
when you look back on it and think about what hippies fought for, free love, equality,
That's what we're doing
environmentalism and stuff. Well, they were fucking right about a lot of stuff, you know. And
what's the point of creating another adjective? That's another term. That's my
well, these things just get born out of, especially now with how quickly we communicate and
Yeah,
stuff. They get
it's
born out of
about efficiency.
hashtags.
Well,
and
can
out
I
of-
call a social justice warrior a douchebag? You know what I
Sure.
mean?
It shouldn't be like
It's
that.
a term.
Well, if they're a douchebag,
But here's-
what I'm saying is that is this person a social justice warrior or whatever? Oh yeah, because he's fighting. Like his opinions are not.
He gets offended too easily.
But
You know,
but here's something I want to present to
I
you
don't
that is like a relevant topic of conversation, and obviously like this isn't my.
Are you saying we haven't been talking about relevant?
No,
stuff?
I mean out there
Yes,
today.
we talk about sex,
yeah.
But
important.
okay, so let me know your thoughts on this. So I believe it's Bill C-16 that came out in the last year or two. That was something like that got pushed forward, where you now have to recognize the 70 plus different gender pronouns.
Oh
Like
my
it
God.
is. Well, there's your answer right there. Right, that's
what?
the 70 plus different labels of gender pronouns that you have to recognize people, and it's actually become written into, I don't know what you call it, state law or
Can you
it's
show
actually,
me what that list is?
well
Can you look it up?
Okay.
but terms but here's a brief example. Terms like zer and z and like what people identify themselves as has been all of a sudden forced into a government regulated thing. So basically I could get you in trouble if you don't recognize me as the pronoun that I identify with. Like it's a form of
Like
discrimination.
I'm a unicorn, and you can only call me a unicorn.
But see, and this
Well,
this is
if
where
it
we're
did
at right
not
now.
call
You
you
know,
a
like this is
unicorn,
kind of the highlight
I would.
of what's happening. The shift right now.
Yeah.
Is where do we? Right, but you don't care. But
Yeah, if you
But-
want me to
but-
call you a unicorn, I'll call you a unicorn.
If
I might think you're kind of crazy, but
That's what I mean.
Okay. So,
Well, it
okay,
depends.
but-
why
I mean,
is
we
it
just-
regulated?
Th-
This
there's one thing.
offendedness of marginalization.
Sometimes
where
you
does the
don't
definition
agree,
come from?
but you are in an environment. Like, we were shooting a film the other day in the church. I was wearing a hat, and like I totally forgot that you like.
Take your
They
hat
have
off.
rules like for that.
Yeah.
I don't even understand why. Like
But that's
I don't-
different. That's not
No,
that's not
it's
government
it's not-
regulated.
No.
We're
It's
we're
not
we're
so
talking
different
about
because it's
state
social-
regulated,
Yeah,
government
that's
regulated.
true. That's
it's
the difference.
But the church is also like a part of society where like they have their own rules, man. And like
Sure, but you don't go to jail for wearing a hat in a church. You don't
but
You don't
get
get
fined.
fired.
But
You know, like
it's
you don't get
true.
put under the
it's true, but
the
you have to
political
take off
microscope.
your hat if people like. It's not that you have to, but that's the thing. Let me get my point across.
Okay, yeah, sir.
So I was wearing my hat anyways until I was like, okay, I'm gonna wear it until someone actually feels offended because I'm not actually offending anyone. So you talk about the
Well, you don't know that.
unicorn. Wait, so this guy comes out and he was like, yeah, so please don't use hat in the church because I took the hat off.
Right.
If you were in India and you enter into a temple with your shoes, you probably would get lynched. Like this would offend people. So what I'm saying is that maybe it doesn't have to be regulated, but I don't want to offend no one in the church. You know, I don't agree with the circumstances. I don't actually. For me, it doesn't make any sense a hat or no hat. But
You're
if you
avoiding
feel
conflict.
Offended,
But
if
when-
you
but
feel
when-
offended, I would take I would take a step back, say okay.
But
I'm
when
sorry,
things
give
enter,
respect.
when you
It's
put
just
things,
respect, man.
I agree.
It's
But
just
when
being human, that's the problem.
totally,
man.
but
Don't put it on their
now
government
you're.
regulated
This is what
thing.
this is what Kyler's point is
yeah.
like. When you make it law, it's totally different.
Law to
It would
wear
be
a
like-
gold
I'm not
star on your
disagreeing, I'm
patch
not
to
disagreeing, I'm just
identify you're a
saying-
Jew.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that
State regulated law.
Right.
it's just
Slippery
something that
slopes
you-
for stuff like that.
It is.
People are trying to teach us to be humans.
Okay, well
There's
here's
something
here's a
wrong.
good example of it, and it relates to your hat thing. Actually, you might not know this. So in Canada, there was a big issue where people that were applying for their citizenship and stuff were wearing hijabs during the ceremony, and so they couldn't. You can't see their face, right?
Yeah.
Which can pose a problem when you're taking like identifying pictures and stuff like that. So, they've now made it illegal in Quebec to wear a hijab, which is something that is rooted in a progressive idea of it's a symbol of oppression for women, but now you're making it illegal for them to wear it
To express a religious ideology. It's
right. Like the argument is like, well, some of them want to have it on. It's part of their culture, it's what they've grown up with. And then the other side of it is, well, but they've grown up with it because it was a symbol of oppression, blah, 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 blah. And then you realize, well, these are two white dudes arguing about
That's
this
what I
in
was about to
fucking parliament.
That is a social justice warrior.
Right?
Man.
And
thing,
We're
though.
so stupid
it is
about
kind
those
of a
things.
social justice warrior thing where that there's somebody that stood up in that fucking citizenship thing. Is like, why does this person have a hood on? I can't come in here with a hat on. What if I came in here with a hat on? If you had stood up in the church and made a big deal about it, like, well, this is a free country and I can wear a hat anywhere I want, and made like a big fucking deal out of it, there would have been people that sided with you and been like, yeah, he can wear a hat wherever he wants. But you're being a fucking douchebag by just making a big scene for no good reason.
No reason. We from our country here, like or part of the world, we think that we know everything about everything. So I like Iranian film, right? And I really like Abbas Kiarostami, for instance. Just an example.
Say that slower, please.
You know I don't speak Spanish.
Yeah.
It's not even
So
Spanish.
Abbas, so Kiarostami, he live in Iran, and they have a couple of rules for him to make his movies and whatever. But he became famous, and I think well, anyways, whenever he would come here to our side of the world, he would get really mad when people would ask him like, oh, but you are like, you guys are censored there by the government and everything. And he was like, oh yeah? Aren't you guys censored by your own economical, Hollywood is censored, man.
Yeah.
You cannot write, you cannot do anything you want. There's a lot of censors.
It's true. It's censored. Well, it is censored. It is actually censored through like FCC and organizations like that.
Yeah.
But it is also censored through like the court of public opinion.
So we think that we know everything. That's just my point. And then another woman from another Iranian film, she came here, and one of the guys was like, "Oh, but you guys are really oppressed in your country, like as a woman." And she started to laugh. She was one of the stars in this Farhadi film. Is Layla? I forgot her last name. And she was like, "No, man, you don't understand. We as women, we have a power in the family that you guys don't understand. The power that we actually have inside of it. The power that we have to say what's going on with the family. It looks like the man is giving the orders, but a lot of times the woman is actually, just around in the corners. It's deviating a lot from social justice warriors.
Well, not entirely, because what you're
our perception of it, right?
yeah, and I mean what you can draw in comparison there is political correctness, right? Is how what is defined as political correctness in terms of what is regulated in the context of media and entertainment, and what is regulated in the context of hate speech and violence. So where is this line that SJWs are drawing with political correctness? Like if you're a stand-up comedian, and of course, basically backboning a race of people or the sex of someone as your joke, as your routine, is not it's like you're an asshole at that point, especially if you don't belong to either of those ideologies. Right. But at what point can you not talk about it at all? What point can the discussion not happen? What point can't you make fun of yourselves without offending some faction of it, right?
Well, we've talked about this before when we talked about comedy. And I think that no real like in the form of comedy especially, no real topic is off offside if you present it properly.
Yeah, it's all
Like
about
you're saying, like
context and
if
intention.
you make the joke about
What's properly
about somebody
though?
being gay and it's funny because they're gay for some reason, then that's a homophobic joke. But if you make the joke about how you were accidentally homophobic because you didn't, know this person was gay or something like that, and the situation was kind of funny, then that's okay. I mean, the gay is not the butt of the joke in that scenario, right? But I think that it stems from, as these values evolve, things about like sexism and racism and stuff like that. As an audience for not just comedy but media in general, entertainment in general, we are what we want to absorb changes too. Like, I went back and watched some old Dave Chappelle stuff, and some of it I didn't find as funny.
Right.
Because it was some of it was like pretty racist and stuff like that, and like the argument is
Still
it's but you watch his Netflix special
when it
compared
was
to
before.
stuff from like 10 years ago or 15 years ago or however long it was he was gone.
The tolerance was different back then.
The tolerance was different. The
we're learning.
climate of what was funny was different, and he adapted to that. Some people don't, and so there are jokes, like I said, like with my dad, like a joke that may have landed 10 years ago at the dinner table because it used a bad word or something like that, doesn't land anymore because it was making fun of handicapped people or something, and like half the dinner table goes,
I think
like,
that's a good
then
progression.
It
though.
is a good
That is a
progression,
positive
and
progression.
it bleeds into the profession of something like comedy, like a dirty comic who like has cheap laughs at other people's expense. Name one. Name a famous one.
Yeah.
Not that it's gonna be a
Louis C.K.?
No.
No.
As like gross as what he did was, he never, like, his jokes were
Joke is
always
on him.
on him.
Yeah.
Even his own masturbation jokes that seem gross now. I mean, they were gross then too, but like
hilarious.
he was always the butt of his own joke. His jokes were always about how disgusting he was. And that's I mean, he was kind of one of the people that was not championing, but the face of this new kind of reformation of people, and like we're gonna watch a Stephen Colbert and laugh more on like political comedy than we would watching fucking Carrot Top do whatever his thing was, like prop comedy and bullshit like that. That as an audience, we're just like, nah, we're beyond that now. We need wittiness, and we need intelligence in comedy, not like mean-spirited jokes at other people's expense. It's not funny anymore.
And this really does loop around to the point of discussion that leads us, because socially we're in a big shift right now, because the generation I guess behind us, or the ones that aren't out there yet, are going to come into a world with this mindset, as opposed to our parents and the generations ahead of them that had the different mindset, because it was rooted in their culture, in their society, and it's what they grew up with, it's what they carried forward with them. And what I wanted to highlight here as being a point is that it's important to recognize these, to point out the stuff, the issues, and to discuss them as to why and why not. But to be on the side of the spectrum here, where you just basically have a yelling match to see who's louder, is not going to solve anything.
No.
Yeah.
To be the loudest marginalized minority or ideology is not going to solve anything, because we're not actually discussing the problem.
Also,
We're not recognizing it. We're presenting it.
and labeling.
Hold on, though.
labeling
Yeah.
people. Just a second.
Okay, go
Labeling
for it.
people as well. It will not make it. I'm just gonna give you an example. Like, and you were talking about generations. My grandfather, which is a guy that I love a lot, he died already. We used to have a lot of conversations. He used to have like some pretty racist comments and some pretty homophobic statements.
Because it was normal back then for them.
But like I would tell him that, Grandpa, like I don't like that. I don't think that's the way. But I wouldn't label him as like racist or homophobic. Like yes,
You almost
he had,
label him as
he had
uneducated.
he had like behaviors that were racist. He had behaviors that were
Morals.
language that was racist.
yes, but like that's the thing. If you label someone like that already as like a douchebag or an idiot, or like you're just ending the discussion, and you were
Stopping
just
progress.
stopping the progress of actually trying to tell these people why this is actually it's not accurate. Like, so what we have been doing more and more is just labeling and labeling and labeling more people, and that this comes back to our second podcast, when we were talking about white people, and like and we had a little bit of a disagreement, which I will go back to that to think about it. Yes, sometimes we can have thoughts that are not very accurate to the moment and to the situation, but that doesn't make us idiots, or that doesn't make us unable to rethink that.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with that.
So, like, I think that the social justice warriors, a lot of times they are just after labeling people and labeling each other instead of actually making a important discussion.
Why I would actually contrast the opposite with you about labels is what I find was happening, and an example of this you can actually see online is with that Ben.
I love your notes, man.
As
just
we're
looking at them, I was
preparing
like,
for a social studies examination here.
This is
But
great.
there's a clip where Ben Shapiro is arguing with a transgender man, saying there's no biological difference between the two genders. Okay, so but there is, because we founded a society on the biology, the science of
Of course,
two
there's
genders.
biological differences.
There's DNA, and there's rooted science in the difference between the two things. But the moment like you start taking away labels, the moment you kind of start grouping everything into one, and how do you define? How do you root a base of
Laws?
Well, yeah, at what point do you start? And this is almost maybe a different conversation, but
Yeah.
but where do you root fact in? If you can't have labels, if you can't, and I don't mean labels as in like derogatory labels. I mean actual labels of man, woman,
Yeah.
rock, or sorry, solid, liquid. It's like, where do you base these arguments for science and facts?
Well, the tough thing is that
if you don't have those labels.
The tough thing is that we're still, like, the science on that is not finished, right? We're discovering new stuff about that all the time, and so it's just recent, like in the last 5 or 10 years, that we've really started to discuss stuff like gender and sexuality as a spectrum and not labels,
Not
right?
just man,
not
girl,
not
gay,
homosexuality, gay, straight, lesbian, and then it's trans, and then like, oh, okay, well, there's people that like both things, and there's people that don't even want to have sex, and like so there's a whole spectrum of people that it just kind of, it breeds this idea in me anyways of like, well, just let it, like, whatever, let it happen. And to Joao's point earlier with like the pronoun thing, if people come up to me and say, hey, I don't really gender identify, could you call me Z instead of her or him? Yeah. Okay.
Totally.
Like, I don't, like, it's not my place to start a stance there to be like, well, I'm not going to call you that because I don't think we should be putting labels on genders and blah, blah, blah. Like, it's not your place. If this is what makes this person comfortable, then it's what makes them comfortable. And honestly, if that makes, I don't know, I was about to cross maybe a line there, but like, if that, I don't know, if it's something that makes you uncomfortable to adjust your behavior to tolerate somebody else, then maybe that's something that you need to look into yourself a little bit, And I'm probably just as fault as that as anybody to certain things, right? But like, and that's not saying that person is necessarily right or wrong. It's just like, well, if the fact that this person, even like cares enough about their hat in church to make a big fuss about it, if they care that much about it, then then okay. Like,
I gotta jump in before I lose this point because
Okay.
you just brought up like a very almost I would say maybe an ironic contrast of this SJW mentality is that they don't adapt for things that make them uncomfortable, and that's I think kind of the point we're touching on is that they don't tolerate this room for difference because it doesn't apply with what they believe in, and it's almost hypocritical in a sense.
it's true.
And it becomes the
becomes a
opposite
belief.
side
Yeah,
of what
I'm
they,
sure
what
I've
they're
said
getting
many
a point.
things throughout this conversation that are hypocritical and contradictory.
Oh, well, it's not even that. It just means like it's just kind of. I'm not signaling you.
No,
on
no,
that.
I'm
I'm signaling.
I'm sure we all have, right?
Yeah, the like that is the mindset of, and it's ironic in that sense that they're actually pushing for these, the inclusion of ideologies,
Yeah.
but at the same time they're pushing others away, and it's not just like, where there's a difference between what we said, progressive and being a SJW person who doesn't even allow room for conversation, but oh God, where am I going?
It's okay. I got a point to come back to you with because
Okay, good.
you were talking before, and I wanted to bring this up about that doesn't solve the problem.
Yeah.
Like let's just put Z and Z or whatever doesn't solve the issue that some people are like discriminating against this fluid gender definition or whatever you want to call it. Excuse me. And your argument was like, well, these people, they fight for these, maybe seemingly trivial things or like small victories or whatever, but that doesn't solve the problem. But it does cause change. Like something like affirmative action, which for those who don't know is like the law in the U.S. that means that companies have to hire a certain amount of minorities and a certain amount of women and stuff like that. I think it's just for minorities. The women thing might be a different law, but that doesn't solve the problem of institutionalized racism or sexism. But it's a change
It's
that
like a
attempts to
Band-Aid.
solve the problem.
It's a Band-Aid.
It's a Band-Aid, and I would argue that those things, those types of things in a truly free and equal society would have to eventually be abolished if we do eventually all view each other as equal. I don't know if that's ever even necessarily a possibility, but maybe. But like, so while these things may not be necessarily targeting the right spot of it, sometimes the right spot of it is so deeply rooted, you can't target it with one thing. You can't target institutionalized racism with affirmative action because that doesn't change the fact that when a white racist sits across the table from a black person interviewing for their job, and they've met their quota for minorities already, so now they don't care anymore. It
They don't
doesn't
have a
change the
job.
fact that they're affecting the society by not allowing certain people to, be included in their view of humanity or whatever you want to call it.
Would you, and this might be a line cross as well, but would you argue, because I brought up the point of institutionalized racism really coming down to the fact that it's ideological racism that exists that kind of is within the institution, but would you argue that having those kind of affirmative action rules is almost contrasting itself, because you're basically now hiring people based on skin color or morals or ethics.
It definitely
or
contrasts
religion,
itself because you'll
as
have
opposed to skill, and it's no
Yeah.
longer equality at that
I
point.
totally
right?
agree. I mean, that's what I meant when like in totally free and equal society, those things shouldn't exist because, yeah, I mean, to be like if the case is that there's 5 jobs available and 5 most qualified people are white men for it, then like I mean, you should in a free society be able to hire those 5 white men for it.
Yeah.
However,
Without the Band-Aid.
right, without the Band-Aid, you have the problem where, well,
We've only got
those people
We
because
don't have a side.
it's not even it's not even that type of thing isn't even necessarily born out of sexism. It's born out of just like pattern and who you're comfortable with, and like men will tend to want to be mostly around other men, like as far as like camaraderie is concerned. And so if they're in positions of power, it just kind of weans down that way. And the only way to really combat that is with laws that we have to put in to try and shift the balance of it, maybe hopefully to the point that we can get rid of it and we can, just hire people based on talent and qualification and all that type of stuff. But even in that instance, you would still have cases of people making claims of discrimination and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because you would have situations where, well, my I don't know, my basketball team is all black people. Like, of course it is. Okay, that's probably a bad example.
But I see what you're getting at. It's
Yeah.
like the utopian idea where we live, in this world where we all get along is beautiful in its concept, but it's not in human nature. It's
What is not in human nature?
well for all of us to get along.
Oh yeah.
It's,
But
but we
doesn't
have
mean
to
that
try.
We have to fight.
Well,
right?
exactly.
Or even to have a positive reaction to somebody that looks different from us. That's against human nature.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty recent.
It's a primal. It's a primal instinct. It's in your DNA, right? It's
So going back to that, I would like to just we all in cinema and stuff, and we've been seeing for the past weeks a lot of those Hollywood stars come out with some pretty nasty stories, and that kind of leans a little bit back into gender and minorities, which comes back to power. Like you see someone like what happened to Kevin Spacey and those cases there, which is it's pretty unfortunate, man. But
what happened to Kevin Spacey wasn't unfortunate.
no. What happened?
What
to
happened
what
to the
he did.
people?
yeah. Like it's pretty unfortunate. Like all
The
the
situation
people,
is unfortunate. Yeah.
and like it's mind blowing.
Yeah, I
but
know.
if you are if you are inside of the industry and you guys been seeing the film industry,
Yeah.
the stratification of powers, like it's pretty vertical, and if you are at the bottom, a lot of people feel entitled to treat you bad.
Mm.
If you're a PA or if you are and then they have the producer and they don't they talk to you differently than they would talk to the actors, than they would talk to the director.
You're talking about social hierarchy.
Yeah, it's no different than anywhere else.
But it's pretty much more stratified. Like it's visible. It's
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's
we
more
are-
visible for
we
sure.
are in Canada, which people tends to be a little bit more
Cordial.
polite.
Patient.
Yeah.
Now, of course, this was going to if we see this here, can you imagine the States where it's more aggressive?
Yeah. None of the stories, as sad and gross as it is, none of the stories surprise me.
But that's the point, everybody now acts surprises. And Hollywood people there, a lot of them oh, I didn't know. Fuck off, man. A lot of these
I
people
kind of
really-
gotta disagree. A lot of the stuff I've been hearing from a lot of the people, major Hollywood stars and stuff, has been yeah, we all know that this has been happening and it's not okay. And now that people are speaking out about it, it's interesting to see actual change happening. It's interesting though that it's happening before things are proven. That's kind of a tough thing for me. And it kind of goes to the social justice warrior thing
I was just
because
gonna get into that.
because these things are alleged, and
But
just from watching things and knowing stuff about the industry and stuff like that, people accept it as truth, because it seems pretty true, and you won't when people come out with very personal accounts of sexual misconduct and God forbid rape and stuff like that, you kind of have to lean to, well, nobody's going to be talking about that unless it actually really happened, or very, very few people. And so, but because their association with this issue, proven or not, the heads start to fall on all these their projects that they were working on and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Not really sympathy for them so much as it is, there are hundreds of people that work on that type of stuff. Again, none of these allegations are proven, but the fact is like you said, with the Iranian woman, we are censored through the marketplace, right? For better or worse. The marketplace, like Netflix knows, proven or not, people are going to view him this way now.
Well,
and so we're
exactly
dropping it.
Is this there's this the concept of innocent until proven guilty doesn't exist now with the social media presence and the social marketing of things, because it's a quick jump to conclusions regardless of the allegations and whether, like, Kevin Spacey basically acknowledged that he did it.
That's true.
And so
He did acknowledge
Louis-
it. That's
Louis-
true. So we
Louis
know it
CK.
happened. That's Africa.
They
And Louis C.K.
acknowledged
as well, yeah.
And Harvey Weinstein acknowledged it.
No, he
No.
hasn't. But
He's the-
but everybody in Hollywood has been like,
They've been joking about it for
they're
years.
like,
It's
they've
like the
always
butt of
joked about
jokes.
it, and now that it's come out, like even people that like Quentin Tarantino, who worked beside him for years, was like, I'm disgusted with myself that I knew and I didn't do anything.
But for companies like Netflix and all these other major studios to instantaneously shut down like House of Cards, well, actually that was being canceled before they even before this thing happened. But for what's his face's new
They're
film,
replacing
they're
him
replacing
in-
him with Christopher Plummer.
yeah, and
but
all the money in the world.
It's almost become a publicity stunt to blacklist these people, to be the first to do it.
Like
To-
people want
without
some heads.
Yeah,
is that what you're saying?
Like of the
want some
hundreds,
blood.
yeah. Without because people
More
us,
people will probably see that movie
the
now.
people supporting the companies are going to be. At the moment the news hits, they're after the companies. Like, oh, why are you still showing the show? Why are you promoting this? Why is this still on your network? This should be gone. So now the company is now silencing itself in almost this publicity stunt to appeal to these people, right?
However, isn't that the same thing that made these people to fall possible?
What do you mean?
Well, you're saying that the public opinion, they would look at the companies and they were like, what are you still doing with these people? Like, why do you still have Kevin Spacey, or why do you still have those films? Like, so maybe those social justice warriors are actually also the reason why it's possible for these people now to fall.
True.
That's what I mean, is like-
That's a good point.
So,
like that.
So, it might not be so bad. The people asking their heads, that sometimes is like, there are some people that are crazy. There are also some people that are like, that's why we can't do this nowadays. Social media,
Yeah.
and people that are actually watching Netflix will be like pretty pissed off. I myself, I probably be like,
Yeah, I can't watch it. I've been
No,
thinking about it.
'cause that's all you
Even
think
Louis
about.
C.K., I don't think I can enjoy the
All
comedy
of a
anymore.
sudden, it's all you think about, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's what happened with like Bill Cosby. It was the almost like
Yeah,
the
I
first-
mean, like we were talking about it before, though. Like I think we have to see the nuance in these different scenarios. I'm not lumping Louis C.K. in with
Cosby?
with
Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah.
with
Or Harvey
even
Weinstein,
Spacey.
yeah.
And I'm not lumping Spacey in with Weinstein, and I'm not even sure I'm lumping Weinstein in with Cosby, because that guy allegedly like drugged and raped like 30 women. Like
which is a
there's a
totally-
So to say to even put them in the same sentence to me is it again kind of go back to the social, to even like a label of things. Like I'm not I'll label all of those people as like sexual harassers at best. But some of them are alleged rapists. Some of them, have admitted to gross pervy conduct. So I don't like lumping them together.
yeah. But like, you see how fast these people can fall today.
Oh yeah.
Which is, I think it's they're gonna be, man, if they're not good people and they would be like, if they consider doing that, they would think again, because they can fall. Like, it's different than back in the days where you had like Marlon Brando that was pretty nasty with some girls. You have that rape scene with in The Last Tango in Paris, that is like, but these people didn't fall.
No.
We didn't have social media.
They didn't have.
Right.
They didn't have the the
so
voice
like,
back then.
Heads up, because sometimes power to the people, it's tricky, but sometimes it's really, really important.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's what I was gonna bring up too. Is like these, as bad as it can be to, I don't want to say the false accusations, but jump to conclusions about it.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that it is actually causing what are allegedly pretty gross people, and admittedly pretty gross people in some cases, the fact that it's leading to just the ability of people to speak out about it and feel validated in their pursuit of justice and stuff like that, versus being pushed aside and told not to bring anything up because it'll ruin your career or whatever.
Mhm.
Like Gal Gadot, I don't know if you heard this today. Do you know who Gal Gadot is?
Yeah,
She's Wonder Woman.
Yeah. Oh.
She said today that she won't be in Wonder Woman if Brett Ratner is producing it,
Yeah,
which he
still
did for the
attached to it.
first one,
Yeah.
and he's been accused of some pretty gross things.
Mhm.
And so all the power to her, man.
Yeah.
Like in her audition 2 years ago or whatever, no clout to be able to do something like that.
Yeah.
But now
Yeah.
you need my face. So, if
Howard used in the
we
right
get
way.
if we get the odd false accusation and the odd, well, this person didn't actually do what they were doing, but the public opinion has kind of shamed them into obscurity anyways. As sad as that is, my opinion is that the
Well, it
other
comes
side
from
of it,
some sort of truth,
yeah, and
some
the other
sort of
side of
event.
it is going to vastly outweigh
Yeah.
those types of issues. And so speak out about it, people that are
I
dealing
would
with those issues,
conclude-
not just in Hollywood,
Yeah.
but all over the place, because it's in youth sports, it's in fucking every industry you can possibly think of. It's just part of our psyche, I guess, in a weird way.
And the only way to really bring it into it is to talk about it.
It's
is,
true.
Is to shine the light.
I would just conclude my part.
Yeah.
Quoting some very intellectual person, which is the Spider-Man.
Mhm.
That when you have more power, you have to have more
Mm.
responsibility.
Yeah.
Yes.
And yeah, all the power to the people, man. Like, we just have to figure out a way in which we can balance that.
Mhm.
But overall, I think we can lean into very interesting times
Yeah.
where powerful people can fall from night to day.
Yeah.
So
And I think we'll have to probably continue that conversation another day, unless you have one final point.
Well, I just had one final observation, and it's not directly with in terms of like the cases of rape and sexual harassment. But I draw in the comparison of status being kind of taken away in terms of like the social or the online social media presence is even. And this is cycling back to the SJW thing, is to even say something wrong, like maybe racist or some sort of underlying homophobic thing
Yeah.
online that some celebrities do, and they just get battered for it without giving a chance to recognize what was wrong with
Yeah.
doing it. Is that you still have to have this discussion. You have to let them recognize what they're doing
Yeah.
is wrong.
Yeah.
You can't just all of a sudden
Label.
lash them out into
Yeah.
the darkness, because
Yeah.
what does that solve?
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's something that came out with Louis C.K. when he like publicly acknowledged and apologized for his actions.
Yeah.
I think that's something that will soften his blow. His allegations, in my opinion, are not as bad as a lot of the things that have come out, even though they are gross. And B, like, he acknowledges that it was gross conduct, asks for no sort of sympathy towards him at all, like,
Just accepted it.
and accepted it as even if it wasn't intended as like a power play with these women, because of my position in the realm of comedy and my position as a producer of some of these shows and stuff like that, even just the question of, will you engage in sexual contact with me, is harassment, because it's not a request. He said in his apology, it's not a request at that point. It's a predicament for these women because they think their jobs might be impacted by it, regardless of whether or not that's true.
Do you think he would have said that same thing if he was caught before Harvey Weinstein?
Yeah.
Just like that.
I do think so, because I think if you look at somebody like Louis C.K. comedy, he's always been open about it.
Of course.
He kind of always has been, and openly disgusted with himself for it, and so the fact that it's maybe not funny anymore because it's true, but he acknowledges the grossness of it, and all you can, like, for me reading his thing, I was like, he sounds like somebody that is actually probably not done this in a while, and recognizes it was a shameful part of who he was at one point. And hopefully he's not that way anymore.
And yeah, that's the thing to look to watch for is does he learn from this?
Does it happen
or
again?
does he fade into oblivion?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Anyways, we always end our podcast on kind of somber notes. Maybe that's because we always do the serious topic second. We should maybe flip those things.
Okay.
But
maybe you can do that.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. We want to thank Jerry for stopping by. He's got to catch a flight back to Mexico tonight, which is disappointing.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. And we want to thank Kyler for stopping by too. And we'll have hopefully both of you back. Kyler for sure. Jerry, whenever you're in town, we'll have you back on.
Definitely, man. Thank you.
And you know what? You can call in. We can hook up the phone and all that.
Let's do it. Skype.
Yeah, Skype in. Skype in.
Thanks
Yeah.
for coming, guys.
Yeah, that's enough for the Slack line, and thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank
Have
you
a
very
good
much,
night.
boss.
Thanks
You're
for
a
having
good
me.
boss. I like it.
I'm thinking it's time for a change. This old place don't feel the same, and I don't know why, but I can't get by. I'm thinking I'd be better off down where women's voice is a kindly sound. It's soothing my soul, 'cause I can't let go, and I'm running out of time. Well, I'm living in my prime. Yeah, I'm running out of time. This life, it ain't mine. Everybody here's the same, they're all caught up in the same damn game. Why do I try when it's all a lie? Bells ringing on bigger things, and we don't even know that we're in the ring. It's coming down, I can hear the sound. It's ringing in my ears. That same old fear. Yeah, it's ringing in my ears. Am I the only one that hears? guess the time's come and gone when we had to worry about being wrong. It's plain to see, that's what it means to be free. I must have been meant for another time when love was easy and stars aligned. It takes a toll to listen to your soul. It's screaming from beneath, but I could really use some sleep. Yeah, it's screaming from